Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I was dead on my feet after another 10-hour shift at the body shop. My hands smelling like motor oil and my back aching from bending over busted bumpers all day. Halloween night had always been just background noise to me. Kids running around in costumes, teenagers egging cars, parents pretending to care. But that year felt different. It was the first Halloween since I'd moved to Evansville, renting a rundown one-bedroom apartment near Lincoln Avenue, the kind of area where the streetlights flickered more than they shined, and the cops only came if someone got stabbed. Rent was cheap, and that was all I cared about. When I clocked out that night, my boss, Harold, slapped me on the back and said, "You heading home, kid? Watch out for the little ghouls. They'll key your car if you don't hand out candy." Gave him a tired grin. "Yeah, no problem, boss. Ain't nobody coming to my building anyway." He laughed, showing a missing mirror. "That's what you think." The streets were buzzing by the time I got home. Kids in plastic costumes ran past the broken sidewalks, their voices echoing between cracked apartment walls. The air smelled like pumpkin, spice, cold rain, and gasoline. Somewhere nearby, someone was grilling burgers on a rusted Weber grill, the smoke curling up into the gray October sky. I parked my beat-up Dodge Charger behind the building and trudged upstairs, planning to crash on the couch with a beer and ignore the noise. But when I got inside, I saw something taped to my front door. It was a flyer printed in cheap red ink. Halloween special, one night only, the Crimson Mask. Experience trick or treat at participating homes for a chance to win $10,000, presented by Redline Promotions Evansville chapter. At the bottom there was a list of addresses, most of them within walking distance. I almost tossed it away, but then I looked closer and saw one of the addresses was right next door. The abandoned duplex that had been boarded up since I moved in. Curiosity kicked in. I'd walked past that place a dozen times. The windows were cracked, the porch sagged, and the whole place smelled faintly of mildew. But now, through the living room blinds, I could see a faint red glow flickering from inside. Someone had lit up the house. I cracked open a beer, sat by the window, and stared at that red light. For a long time, people came and went, some kids in masks, a couple of adults, even a man in a slick black coat holding a clipboard. They'd go inside for a few minutes and come back out laughing, holding little red bags that looked like trick-or-treat treat candy. Sacks. Around 9 hour, I figured, what the hell? Maybe it was just a neighborhood gimmick. Maybe I'd win something. And honestly, I didn't feel like sitting alone all night again. I threw on my old flannel and jeans, grabbed a beanie, and headed out. The night was colder than before, the kind of chill that makes your breath look like cigarette smoke. As I crossed the cracked sidewalk, I noticed a man sitting on the duplex porch. He wasn't wearing a costume, just a dark red hoodie and a pale mask, like one of those plastic theater masks from Party City, but hand-painted, streaked with what looked like dried blood. "Evening," he said, voice low and smooth. "You here for the Crimson Mask?" "Yeah, I guess," I said, glancing at the flyer still in my hand. He nodded slowly. "You got invited. That means you play." I frowned. "Play what?" He tilted his head. "The game," before I could ask what the hell that meant. The front door creaked open and a woman in a long black dress stepped out. She wore the same mask as the guy, only hers had a cracked cheek. "Welcome," she said. "Step inside and don't remove your mask once it's given to you. If you do, the game ends." She held out a crimson-colored plastic mask and a small card with a number written on it. 27. "This is just a neighborhood thing, right?" I asked. "Like a haunted house?" She smiled behind her mask. "Something like that." Inside, the air smelled like burnt candles and damp carpet. A faint sound of whispers filled the hall. There were maybe 20 people scattered around the living room, all wearing masks. Some were laughing nervously, others scrolling on their phones, and one guy was chugging from a flask like he wanted to forget where he was. In the corner, an old tube TV played static. The woman in black stood by it and raised her hand. "Welcome," "To the Crimson Mask," she said. "Tonight you will each visit 3 houses. At each house you'll receive a piece of the truth. Complete the game and you'll win." The whispers grew louder. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number texted me. "House number 2 waits for you. Follow the red lights." I looked around, but nobody seemed surprised. Everyone's phones were lighting up with the same kind of messages. The woman gestured toward the back door. "Your time begins now." Outside, the neighborhood looked completely different. The streetlights had dimmed, and a red glow pulsed faintly from the direction of Lincoln Avenue. A guy wearing a skeleton mask came up beside me. "First time?" "Yeah," I said. "Same. My girlfriend dragged me here, but she chickened out last minute." He chuckled, but it sounded forced. "Guess I'm playing alone now." We walked together toward the first house. It was only a few blocks away, but each step felt longer, like the world around us stretched out. The red glow came from cheap LED lights lining the porch. The door was already open. Inside, everything smelled like copper. A woman in a blood-red apron stood behind a kitchen counter. Her hands were wet, but I couldn't tell if it was water or something else. "Happy Halloween," she said sweetly. "Take a treat." On the counter were 3 small Krabby Patty-style sliders, each on a paper plate. I laughed. "Seriously? They're serving burgers now?" The skeleton mask guy shrugged and picked one up. "Hell, I'm starving." He bit into it before I could say anything. His body stiffened instantly. His mask fell off and blood poured from his mouth like syrup. He dropped to the floor, convulsing, his eyes rolling back. I stumbled backward, slamming into the door frame. The woman behind the counter just smiled. He shouldn't have taken the first bite. It wasn't his turn. I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted down the block until my lungs burned. I ripped off the mask, gasping. But my phone buzzed again. "You broke the rule. You took it off. The game follows you now." My heart slammed in my chest. I threw the phone to the ground, but it buzzed again, this time from somewhere else. A faint light glowed behind me. Someone was walking toward me, wearing my discarded mask. "Put it back on," a voice said from under it. "It's your turn." Ran, again cutting through alleys, tripping over trash bags and broken bottles. The entire neighborhood felt wrong. Every house I passed had the same red glow in its windows. Faces stared at me from behind curtains. At one point, I saw Harold's truck parked outside one of the houses. He was standing in the doorway, still in his work shirt, maskless. He looked terrified. "Ethan," he shouted. "Don't!" Before he could finish, someone grabbed him from behind and dragged him inside. The door slammed shut. I turned and bolted for home. When I finally reached my apartment building, the red glow was there too, leaking from under the doors, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. I stumbled upstairs, slammed my door, and locked it. But when I looked at the window, my reflection wasn't mine. I saw myself wearing the crimson mask. I blinked. The reflection grinned. Then my phone rang. Unknown number again. "Game's not over, NAR 27. You brought it home." I dropped the phone and backed away. The lights flickered. From the hallway came a sound. Slow footsteps scraping against the wood. Someone knocked. "Trick or treat," a voice whispered. I froze. "Trick or treat," it said again louder. When I didn't answer, the door handle started turning. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a wrench, and held my breath. The door burst open. Standing there was the woman in the cracked mask, her eyes glinting under the red light. Behind her, dozens of masked figures filled the hallway. "You played," she whispered. "Now it's your turn to serve." The mask in my reflection smiled wider. I felt something cold press against my face, plastic, wet, and sticky. I screamed as they forced it onto me. The world went black. 2 days later, the Evansville Courier ran a small article buried in the back pages. Local man reported missing. Residents claim strange Halloween gathering. Police are investigating reports of a private Halloween event linked to multiple missing persons. Authorities found several masks and blood-stained flyers in a vacant duplex on Lincoln Avenue. The building has since been condemned. They never found me. But every Halloween since, someone tapes that same red flyer to new doors across Evansville. People still play the game, and when the lights go out, I'm the one handing out the masks. I grew up in a quiet little town in Pennsylvania called Millbrook. One of those places where everyone knew everyone, where fall always smelled like burnt leaves and cold air. Halloween was a big deal there. Every year, the whole town decorated. Early fake cobwebs draped over porch lights, carved pumpkins on every step, paper ghosts hanging from trees that had long lost their leaves. But that year, 2019, something about Halloween felt off. Maybe it was just me. I just moved back home after years of living in the city, broke, exhausted, and barely keeping it together after a bad breakup. I was 31, crashing at my mom's place, until I could figure things out. I told myself I'd only stay a few months. But as soon as October rolled around, I found myself drawn to the same old streets I used to trick or treat on as a kid. Back then, everything had felt magical. The orange glow of the streetlights, the sound of laughter echoing between houses, the smell of pumpkin candles burning in windows. It was safe, familiar. I guess that's why I agreed to help my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, hand out candy that year. She was 70, lived alone, and always went overboard on decorations. Her husband had passed a few years earlier, but she still did Halloween for the neighborhood kids, as she put it. That night I was sitting on her porch, a bowl of candy on my lap, wrapped up in a hoodie as the wind cut through the trees. She was inside making cider, humming softly. The kids came in waves, little vampires, superheroes, princesses, and zombies. Every few minutes the porch light flicked on, and I'd hear that familiar shout, "Trick or treat." I smiled every time. For a moment I forgot about everything. The breakup, the debt, the exhaustion, it was just normal again. But around 9:00 p.m., things started to get strange. The crowd of kids thinned out and the street grew quiet. The wind picked up, rattling the fake skeletons and tossing leaves across the pavement. I was scrolling through my phone when I noticed someone across the street. A lone kid standing perfectly still under the flickering streetlight. He was wearing an old-fashioned costume, looked handmade, a white cloth mask with 2 small eye holes and a faded brown cloak that dragged across the ground. I thought maybe it was one of the neighbor's kids being shy, so I called out, "Hey buddy, you trick-or-treating?" He didn't respond, didn't even move, just kept staring. I chuckled nervously. "You want some candy?" He tilted his head, slow, unnatural, like a puppet on a string, and started walking toward me. The way he moved made my stomach tighten. No bounce, no rhythm, just stiff, steady steps like he was dragging his feet. I waited at the top of the porch, bowl in hand, trying to act casual. When he reached the steps, he stopped again. Up close, I could see that the mask wasn't paper or plastic. It looked dirty, like old fabric that had soaked up something. The edges were frayed, and the holes weren't even cut evenly. "You okay, kid?" I asked. He raised his little brown paper bag, silent. I reached in the bowl and tossed a few pieces in. "There you go, happy Halloween." He didn't leave. He just stood there, bag still raised, staring at me through those uneven holes. "Hey, you good? Where are your parents?" "Nothing." The air felt heavier now. I could hear the wind whistling through the trees behind the house, the faint sound of a dog barking down the street. Then slowly he lowered the bag and turned around, walking back into the fog that had started to creep along the road. I exhaled, shaking my head. "Weird kid," I muttered. When Mrs. Callahan came back out, I told her about it. "Oh, that's probably Tommy," she said, waving it off. "The Reynolds boy, he's quiet, doesn't talk much." "Does Tommy wear creepy homemade ghost costumes?" She laughed. "Oh, honey, it's Halloween, and they all look creepy." I wanted to believe her, but something about that kid lingered in my mind. The way his head tilted, the silence, that old stained mask. Later that night, after the last of the kids were gone, I helped her clean up. I remember saying goodbye and stepping out into the street around 11. The fog had thickened. I could barely see 10F to ahead. The air smelled like wet leaves and burnt pumpkin. As I was walking home, just 2 houses down, I saw movement at the edge of my vision. Across the street between 2 maple trees was that same small figure standing still, watching. I froze. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "You shouldn't be out here this late." No answer. I took a few steps closer, squinting through the fog. That's when I realized something was off. The kid wasn't holding the bag anymore. His hands were by his sides. One of them was wet. Even from across the street, under that dim orange glow, I could see it shining. I took another step, and he moved fast. Too fast for a kid. 1 second he was standing there, the next he was gone, swallowed by the fog. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I woke up to sirens. 2 police cars and an ambulance were parked in front of Mrs. Callahan's house. My stomach dropped. I ran outside in my sweatpants and slippers. One of the officers stopped. "Me. Sir, you live nearby?" "Yeah, right there." "What happened?" He hesitated. "The homeowner, Mrs. Callahan, one was found this morning. Neighbor came to check on her. Looks like a break-in." My chest tightened. "Is she?" He shook his head. The world blurred for a second. I remember trying to ask more questions, but my mind felt like static. They wouldn't let me in the house. They just told me to go home. I sat on my porch for hours watching the cops move in and out. Around noon, a corner van showed up. That's when I saw them carry her out. That night, I couldn't stop replaying everything. The boy, the bag, the way he moved. I tried to tell myself it was just some psycho, maybe someone wearing a costume to break in, but deep down, something about it didn't add up. I talked to Officer Green, one of the locals I knew from school. "Green, that kid I saw last night. You think it's connected?" He sighed. "You're not the only one who saw him. We got 3 calls last night about some kid in an old mask walking around after curfew. By the time patrol got there, he was gone." "What do you think it is?" He gave me a tired look. "It's Halloween. Probably some teenager screwing around. You know how it goes." But I could tell he didn't believe that either. A week passed. The decorations started coming down, but the mood in town stayed off. People whispered. Someone said Mrs. Callahan's door had been unlocked from the inside. Others said they found a brown paper bag near her back door filled with old candy wrappers. Then 3 days later, I found something on my porch. A small paper bag, folded neatly. Inside were 3 pieces of candy, the same kind I'd handed out that night, and a note, just one line. "You forgot to say trick or treat." My hands went cold. I looked around. The street was empty. I called Green again. He came by, took the bag, wrote up a report, but I could tell by the way he looked at me he thought I'd left it there myself. That night I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow in the fog looked like that small figure. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. 3 soft knocks at my door. I froze. My phone was on the couch, just out of reach. The knocks came again. 3. Slow, deliberate. Trick or treat. A voice whispered from the other side. Not a kid's voice. Low, raspy, mocking. I sat there paralyzed, didn't move, didn't breathe. After a few seconds, the knocking stopped. When the sun rose, I found another paper bag outside, empty this time. Green moved me into his brother's place for a while, said it was just to be safe. But that didn't matter. Every night I still heard the knocks, faint, distant, sometimes on the walls instead of the door. Eventually I left Millbrook, packed my stuff and moved to another state. But last week, 4 years later, a friend from back home sent me a photo, a news post, another house on my old street, another break-in on Halloween night. The same pattern, no forced entry, no fingerprints, just a brown paper bag left on the porch and under it written in shaky handwriting, "Trick or treat." I always hated Halloween, but not for the usual reasons. It wasn't the costumes or the candy or the whole trick-or-treating ritual. It was the noise, the constant knocking, the laughter, the porch lights flashing on and off. Growing up, our house was the kind that everyone avoided. My dad never handed out candy, and my mom used to draw the curtains before dark like she was shutting out a storm. When I moved out, I swore I'd do things differently. I'd be the friendly neighbor, the one who smiled, handed out fun-sized Snickers, said, "Happy Halloween," like I actually meant it. But that was before last year. I live in a small town called Ravenure up in northeastern Pennsylvania. You'd miss it if you blinked driving through. Just a cluster of streets, a gas station, and a diner that closes before 8. It's the kind of place where everyone's front porch light means something. A glowing pumpkin on the porch means we're friendly. A dark house means don't bother. Last Halloween, I had the late shift at the McDonald's just outside town. It's tucked between the Forest Line and Route 14, with the next nearest place being an old storage facility that's been empty for years. The night was cool, crisp, and smelled like rain on asphalt. When I clocked in, Heather, the shift manager, was already barking at the Fryer crew. "Guys, we're not falling behind tonight, it's Halloween. People want nuggets, not excuses." I laughed under my breath and tied my apron. "Every holiday, same speech," I said. Heather rolled her eyes. "Then maybe you should start giving it since you're basically the assistant manager without the title." I shrugged. "Yeah, but I don't get paid enough to yell at people." She smirked. "You and me both." The drive-thru was slammed. That night, families, coming back from trick-or-treating. Kids still in costumes, sugar-crazed and screaming in the back seats. One guy came through dressed as Michael Myers. Didn't say a word. Just handed me a 20 through the window. When I handed him his order, he just turned his head slowly and drove off. Creepy, but I laughed it off. By 10:30, the rush had died down. Heather went to the office to do paperwork, and the rest of the crew started cleaning up. I volunteered to take out the trash. It got me a few minutes of quiet, and I liked the night air more than the smell of fryer grease. Anyway, the dumpster was behind the store, near the edge of the woods. The parking lot lights barely reached that far, so you could only see outlines of the trees beyond the fence. I dumped the bag in and was about to head back when I saw something at the tree line. A small flicker of orange light, like a candle. At first I thought it was a jack-o'-lantern. Then I noticed it was moving. When I looked closer, I saw a kid standing there, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He was wearing one of those old plastic costumes, the kind you buy at a dollar store, the kind with a thin mask and a printed bodysuit. It looked like a scarecrow, though the mask was cracked down the middle. He was holding a plastic pumpkin bucket and a small candle flickering inside it. "Hey, buddy," I called out, squinting. "You lost?" He didn't answer. He just stood there breathing heavy. "Your parents around?" I asked, taking a step closer. That's when he spoke. Quiet, muffled behind the mask. "Trick or treat?" His voice was strange, flat, emotionless. The kind of tone that makes your stomach twist before your brain even knows why. I tried to laugh it off. "Sorry, kid. I don't have candy out here. Stores closed for trick-or-treating." He tilted his head. "Then you should have turned off your light." Before I could reply, the wind picked up and blew the candle out. When I looked back, the boy was gone. Just gone. I told myself it was nothing. Probably some local kid trying to scare me. But as I walked back to the restaurant, I couldn't shake this cold feeling in my chest like I'd been watched for too long. By the time I got home, it was a little past midnight. My apartment's at the edge of town. Second floor of an old 2-story, house split into rentals. The streets were empty, porch lights off, candy wrappers stuck to the sidewalks. I showered, threw on some sweats, and collapsed onto my couch. I was halfway through a rerun of The Office when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Nobody knocks that late out here. I got up, peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the dim porch light and the wind pushing leaves across the steps. Then came the voice. "Trick or treat." It was soft, childlike, familiar. I unlocked the door halfway before my instincts kicked in. "Hey, who's out there?" No answer. I turned on the porch light. The bulb flickered once before dying completely. When the light came back for a split second, I saw something. Someone standing at the edge of the yard. A small figure. Same cracked mask, same pumpkin bucket, and then it was gone again. The next morning, I found dirt on my porch steps like someone had been standing there barefoot. My Ring camera should have caught it, but when I checked the footage, the entire clip between 12:01 and 12:07 a.m. was just static. I brought it up to my friend Chris at work later that day. He's the overnight fry cook. Loud, sarcastic, never takes anything seriously. "Bro," he said between bites of a McDouble. "It's Halloween. Probably some dumbass kid trying to freak you out." "Maybe," I said, "but my doorbell cam doesn't glitch like that." Chris grinned. "You think it's a ghost kid? You need holy fries. Or something?" I rolled my eyes, but deep down I wasn't laughing. That night when I got home, I noticed something else. Muddy handprints on my window. Small hands. I decided to leave my phone recording by the window just in case. Around 2 a.m. I woke up to a faint sound, like plastic scraping against wood. I stayed still, barely breathing. In the morning I checked the recording. The sound was clear, slow, deliberate tapping. Then a whisper. Trick or treat. And then laughter, not a child's laughter. Something deeper. Wet like someone laughing through water. 2 nights later, I was closing again. Heather had called out sick, so I was in charge. Around 11:15, the drive-through bell went off. I checked the monitor. Nothing. I pressed the mic. Drive-through's open. "Can I help you?" Silence. Then static. Then that same phrase again. Trick or treat. I froze. Is this a prank? Who is this? No reply. I walked to the back door, the same one that led to the dumpster. The fog outside was thick, but I could make out the faint outline of something. Standing near the fence, a kid, the same scarecrow mask. Only this time the costume looked darker, wet, almost soaked through. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound brave. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to leave." "All right." He tilted his head just like before. "You didn't give me candy," he said. "You owe me." The air suddenly smelled like soil and rot. "Listen," I said slowly. "You need to go home now." He stepped closer. His shoes made no sound on the wet pavement. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away. A second later, something hit the glass hard, then again. Each thud louder, faster. Trick or treat. The lights flickered. The fryer hissed even though it was off. I grabbed my phone, but before I could call anyone, the pounding stopped. I waited, then slowly crept toward the door. When I looked out the small window, he was gone. But on the concrete, written in something dark and dripping, were the words, "One more night." I didn't go to work the next night. I called off, told Heather I had the flu. Around 9:30, there was a knock at the door. I froze, my heart thudding so loud it felt like it filled the room. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. Then came the whisper right outside the door. Trick or treat. I didn't breathe, didn't answer. Another knock, harder this time. Trick or treat. I reached for my phone to call the cops, but before I could dial, I heard the scraping sound again, like something dragging across the floor from inside the house. I turned slowly toward the hallway, and there he was, standing in the dark, his cracked mask glinting under the faint TV light. "How did you?" He stepped forward. I stumbled back against the wall. His mask shifted slightly, and I saw what was underneath. No face, just blackness. Empty and endless. He raised his bucket toward me. Inside, instead of candy, were teeth. Human teeth, small and yellowed. "You forgot to give me mine," he said softly. I screamed, grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and threw it. The light shattered. When I turned back, he was gone. The front door was wide open, swinging in the cold wind. The police came, of course. I told them everything. They found no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints, just a small pile of dirt where I'd seen him standing. They said maybe I fell asleep and dreamt it. Maybe it was exhaustion from work. Maybe I was under stress. But I know what I saw. I moved out of Ravenshire a month later. Got a new job at a coffee shop 2 towns over. No night shifts, no Halloween decorations. But every October 31st, like clockwork, I find something waiting on my porch in the morning. A small plastic pumpkin bucket filled with dirt and 1 human tooth. Everyone knows everyone else's business, where gossip travels faster than the mail. You don't get to reinvent yourself in Kingsfield. You just grow older and quieter. I work nights at the McDonald's on Route 17, right at the edge of town. It's one of those 24-hour ones that somehow feels more isolated after dark. The bright yellow arches outside glow like a beacon for truckers, shift workers, and the occasional drunk from Murphy's Bar down the road. I've been there for 6 years. Ever since my dad's stroke forced me to drop out of community college and take care of him. My manager, Lydia, always says I've got a reliable face. I think that's her polite way of saying I look tired enough to belong there. Halloween night was supposed to be quiet. The storm warnings had kept most of the trick-or-treaters home, and even Murphy's was half empty when I passed by at 8. Inside, McDonald's. The fryer hummed, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the smell of fries and grease soaked into everything, including my hoodie. It was just me, Tina, our shift lead, and Kyle, the new kid from the high school. Kyle was the kind who kept his earbuds in half the time and laughed at his own jokes. He was supposed to close with me that night, but he'd been complaining about his stomach since his break. "You think maybe it's the nuggets?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "I think it's the 4 Monster energy drinks you had before your shift," I said. He groaned. "Man, I'm dying. Halloween curse or something." Tina was counting the register, humming some old country song under her breath. She looked up and said, "You're fine, Kyle. Finish wiping down the lobby, then you can head home. We'll cover." He didn't argue, just gave a weak thumbs up and shuffled off toward the lobby with a rag and spray bottle. Outside, the wind picked up, howling across the empty parking lot. The rain came in sideways, pelting the big glass windows, with such force that the neon reflections rippled across the wet tile floor. I was restocking the condiments when I heard the soft crackle of the drive-through intercom. It wasn't the usual chime, just static. Then through the noise came a faint voice. "Trick or treat." I froze. It wasn't playful. It wasn't some kid goofing off. It was slow, almost slurred, like each word took effort to form. I pressed the button. "A drive-thru's open, sir. What can I get you?" Silence. Then again, "Trick or treat." Tina looked up from the register. What the hell was that? "Someone screwing around," I said, forcing a laugh. "Probably kids with a Bluetooth speaker or something." But when I looked at the drive-through camera monitor, there was no car, just the rain hammering down on the empty asphalt. About 10 minutes passed before the front door chimed. The gust that followed was cold enough to raise goosebumps. Standing there, dripping rainwater onto the floor, was a man in an old brown coat. His face was pale, the skin blotchy like he'd been outside for hours. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his eyes, gray, almost milky, seemed to flicker under the fluorescent lights. Tina instinctively stepped behind the counter. "Sir, we're closing the lobby soon," she said carefully. The man didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of what looked like damp straw. He dropped it onto the counter. The smell hit instantly. Wet earth, rot, and something faintly metallic. You okay there?" I asked. He finally looked at me. "The scarecrow's hungry." Kyle laughed nervously from across the room. "Yo, what?" The man's expression didn't change. He just nodded toward the straw on the counter and said again, "He's hungry. You should feed him before he feeds himself." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe you need to leave, sir. It's pouring outside. Do you want me to call someone for you?" "A ride?" He shook his head, water flicking off his coat. "Too late for rides. Too late for all of us." Then he turned and walked right back into the storm. We watched him cross the parking lot until the rain swallowed him up. Tina exhaled hard. "Well, that was freaking creepy." "Yeah," I said quietly, staring at the handful of straw, still sitting on the counter. It looked wrong, moldy, and when I picked up a piece with the napkin dispenser, I realized it wasn't straw at all. It was hair. I threw it straight into the trash. An hour later, Tina left to lock the dumpsters out. Back. The storm had slowed to a drizzle, and I was mopping the lobby floor. Kyle had gone home sick 20 minutes earlier. The store felt heavier somehow, like the air was thicker, muffled. Then I heard Tina scream. I dropped the mop and ran toward the back door. It was wide open, swinging in the wind. Tina stood outside, pale as chalk, pointing toward the far edge of the lot near the tree line. "Tell me you see that," she whispered. At first, I thought it was just the shadows moving. But then lightning flashed and I saw it. Something standing, upright in the field beyond the fence. A scarecrow, but it wasn't the usual kind. It was tall, maybe 7'50", with a burlap sack for a head and a dark coat that flapped in the wind. Its arms hung low, too low, almost brushing the wet grass. I blinked, and when lightning flashed again, it was closer. "Inside, ow," I said, slamming. The door shut. I bolted it and grabbed my phone, but of course no service. Tina was shaking, muttering something about how her grandma used to tell her stories about harvest spirits. I tried to laugh it off, but when the power flickered, I couldn't pretend anymore. The fryers went silent. The buzzing lights dimmed until only the glow of the McDonald's sign outside bled through the window. Then, tap, tap, tap on the my glass. We both turned. There was something pressed against the window. A burlap face. 2 dark holes where eyes should have been, and a smile crudely stitched in black thread. Tina screamed again and ran for the office, slamming the door behind her. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a metal fry basket, and backed toward the counter. The tapping stopped. Then came the voice again, muffled, but clear through the storm. "Trick or treat." The next hour was chaos. I tried calling the police on the office landline, but the line just crackled with static. Tina locked herself in the back and refused to come out. I could hear her whispering a prayer. At some point, the front door chimed again. My stomach dropped. I peeked around the corner. The door was wide open, swinging in the wind. Rain soaked the entryway and muddy footprints trailed across the tile. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and followed the tracks. They led to the counter, then behind it toward the stockroom. "Tina," I called out. No answer. The flashlight flickered as I stepped through the swinging kitchen doors. Fryers cold, floor slick with water. And then I heard its soft, ragged breathing. In the corner, something was standing by the freezer door. For a moment, I thought it was Tina, but as I got closer, the light caught on fabric, brown burlap, a stitched mouth. It turned its head slowly toward me. "Trick or treat," it rasped. I swung the flashlight. It hit solid. The burlap tore open, revealing what looked like a hollow cavity stuffed with damp straw. But the smell, it wasn't straw. It was decay. Flesh. I ran out the kitchen, through the lobby, straight into the rain. I didn't stop until I reached my car. But when I got in and turned the key, the headlights came on, and there it was. Standing in the middle of the lot, head tilted, rain dripping off its sackcloth face, I backed out so fast I nearly spun out onto the road. I didn't look back. The next morning, I drove by the McDonald's. Police cars lined the parking lot. Yellow. Tape fluttered in the breeze. I parked across the street. An officer I recognized, Sergeant Doyle, approached me. "You work here, right?" "Yeah," I said. My voice barely came out. "What happened?" He sighed. "Your manager, Tina, right? We found her in the freezer. Hypothermia. Door was locked from the inside. I felt sick. Locked from the inside." "How's that even?" "She left a note," he said, flipping open his pad. "The scarecrow's fed now." That's all it said. He closed the pad and gave me a long look. "You should probably take a few days off, son." I didn't argue. That night, I packed a bag and drove to my cousin's place 2 towns over. I told myself I'd quit, start fresh somewhere else. But a week later, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the town Facebook group. The McDonald's had reopened under new management. Comments said they'd renovated the kitchen, fixed the power issues, even replaced the sign out front. But one photo caught my eye. Someone had posted a picture of the new fall decorations, a scarecrow right by the drive-through menu board. Same coat, same stitched smile. I stared at the picture for a long time. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the reflection of the drive-through window, there was a faint figure standing inside the restaurant. Right behind the counter, a man in a damp brown coat. I don't work night shifts anymore. I moved downstate closer to the city where the lights never really go out. But every Halloween without fail, I get a notification on my phone. A spam text from some unknown number. Every year, same message, just 2 words, trick or treat. And I swear every time it rains, I can smell wet straw. I grew up in a quiet town called Millfield, tucked between the cold hills of northeastern Pennsylvania. The kind of place where autumn came early and stayed too long. The air always smelled like wood smoke, damp leaves, and the faint sweetness of apple cider that local stands sold by the roadside. Halloween was the one night everyone seemed to come alive here. Kids in costumes racing down narrow sidewalks, porch lights flickering orange, and the sound of laughter echoing through the chilly night air. Back then I was 16, too old to trick or treat, too young to stay home without supervision. My mom was working a double shift at the hospital, and my dad was out on another business trip. That left me in charge of my 12-year-old cousin, Jonah, who had come over for the weekend. He was obsessed with Halloween. It didn't matter how cold, it got or how much candy he already had. He'd keep going house to house until every porch light on the block went dark. That Halloween night started like any other. I remember standing by the front door watching through the glass as Jonah zipped up his cheap plastic vampire cape. "Come on, man," he said, tugging on my sleeve. "You promised we'd hit Laurel Drive this year. That's where the big houses are." I sighed. "It's like half a mile away, Jonah. We can go to Maple Street instead. It's closer." He frowned. Maple's for babies. Laurel has full-sized bars. That was his argument every year. Full-sized candy bars. And I always gave in. I grabbed my hoodie from the rack, locked the door, and followed him down the front steps into the sharp October wind. The streets were alive, kids running, dogs barking, porch decorations swaying in the breeze. The crunch of leaves under our sneakers was loud enough to drown out the faraway hum of traffic. By the time we reached the first row of houses, Jonah was already ahead, his candy bag swinging from side to side. I watched him run up to the first porch yelling, "Tick or treat," before I even made it halfway up the walkway. The older couple who lived there laughed and dropped candy into his bag. I smiled politely, waved, and waited as he sprinted to the next house. For a while, everything was normal. Kids laughed. Parents chatted. Someone had a portable speaker playing Thriller. The air smelled like cinnamon and wet leaves. But then something small, something I didn't notice at first, started to shift. It was at the end of the 3rd block when I saw it. At the edge of a yard, propped up beside a white picket fence, stood what I assumed was a decoration. A scarecrow. It wore a dirty flannel shirt, ripped jeans, and a burlap sack mask with 2 black buttons sewn where eyes should have been. Its straw-stuffed hands drooped to its sides. "Cool decoration," Jonah said, following my gaze. "Creepy, though." "Yeah," I replied. "Realistic?" It was realistic. Too realistic. The way its shoulders slouched, the tilt of its head. It looked less like a prop and more like someone standing perfectly still, but I brushed it off. People went all out for Halloween in Millfield. We kept walking, our breath fogging in the cold. Jonah darted up porches, filling his bag with candy while I trailed behind, hands stuffed in my hoodie pockets. After a while, I noticed something strange. Every few houses, I'd catch a glimpse of that scarecrow again. Not the same one, at least. I told myself it wasn't, but it looked identical. Same flannel, same jeans, same posture. When we turned onto Laurel Drive, the laughter and music faded behind us. That street was quieter. Fewer decorations, fewer kids. The houses were spaced farther apart. The street lights dimmer. Jonah didn't seem to care. "This is it," he said, excited. "The big ones." He ran up to the first house. I stood at the edge of the driveway looking down the road. A thick fog had started to roll in. softening the edges of the houses and turning the distant lights into hazy orbs. That's when I saw it again. The scarecrow. It was standing under a streetlight about 30 yards away, perfectly still. "Hey," I called softly, my voice catching in my throat. Jonah looked back. "What? Do you see that?" He squinted. Probably another decoration. But something in my gut told me it wasn't. The way the light hit the burlap mask, it didn't look like cloth. It looked like skin stretched tight, pale and uneven. "Let's skip this side," I said. "Go back toward the main road." Jonah groaned. "What?" "No, we haven't even." I cut him off. "Please humor me." He looked at me for a second, then sighed. "Fine." We turned around. That's when the scarecrow was gone. My stomach twisted. I scanned the street. Nothing but fog and the faint flicker of a porch light. We walked faster, neither of us talking. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant laughter, even our own footsteps felt magnified, like the night itself was listening. By the time we reached the corner, Jonah stopped and pointed. Look, across the street beside a mailbox stood the same scarecrow. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. How the hell? Maybe people are doing a theme or something, Jonah offered, though his voice sounded unsure. We crossed the street quickly. I tried to act calm, but my pulse was hammering in my neck. We passed one more house when Jonah froze. "Do you hear that?" I listened. At first, nothing, then a faint rustling sound, straw shifting. "Probably the wind," I muttered, though there wasn't any. Jonah's eyes were wide. "It's moving." I turned and my heart dropped. The scarecrow's head was tilted upward now, facing us. "Okay," I said, grabbing Jonah's arm. "We're going home." But no arguments. We walked fast, then faster. The sound of leaves crunching followed us, but it didn't sound like ours. I looked back once, just once, and saw it standing halfway down the block. Closer. "Run," I said. We sprinted the rest of the way home, our bags thumping against our legs, candy spilling behind us. When we reached the porch, I fumbled with the key, my hands shaking. Jonah was crying now, his face red and streaked with sweat. "Inside," I whispered, slamming the door shut behind us. We stood there for a moment, panting. The house was silent except for the sound of our breathing. Jonah spoke first. "It was real, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. I peeked through the living room. Curtain? Nothing. The street was empty. "See?" I said, forcing a smile. "Probably just someone messing around." Jonah didn't respond. He just sat on the couch, still gripping his candy bag. I made us some hot chocolate, trying to shake the unease. The heater clicked on, filling the house with that dry, metallic smell. Slowly, things started to feel normal again. Jonah's breathing evened out, and I turned on the TV to drown out the silence. By 10:30, he'd fallen asleep on the couch. I turned off the lights and started up the stairs, glancing once more through the window out of habit, and froze. There, across the street under the same flickering streetlight, stood the scarecrow, its head tilted slightly higher now, its shoulders straighter. My throat went dry. I stepped back, heart pounding. "Not possible," I whispered. I called the non-emergency. Police line told them some idiot was trespassing. They said they'd send a car through the area. 20 minutes later, a cruiser rolled by. The officer shined his light across the yards. Nothing. The scarecrow was gone again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, every creak of the house making me jump. Around 2 a.m., I finally started to doze off until I heard it. Soft tapping sound from the porch. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was branches, but the rhythm was deliberate. 3 slow taps, then silence. I crept toward the window and pulled back the curtain a fraction of an inch. There were boots, muddy, worn boots, and above them straw. My stomach flipped. I dropped the curtain and stumbled backward, nearly tripping over Jonah's candy bag. Then the tapping came again, louder this time. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line as I locked the front door again, whispering that someone was outside. When the police arrived, they found nothing. No footprints, no marks, just a few loose pieces of straw on the porch. The next morning, there was a new scarecrow in our yard. It was nailed to the tree near the mailbox, its burlap face sagging forward, a hollow-stitched smile where its mouth should have been. Jonah swore he didn't see anyone put it there. The police said it was probably a prank, kids from school. But I knew better. That week, decorations started disappearing up and down Laurel Drive. Pumpkins smashed, skeletons torn apart, candy bowls gone. Every night I saw the scarecrow a little closer. Once by the sidewalk, then near a fence. Then just beyond the porch light. And then one night it vanished completely. For days the neighborhood felt different, quieter. The laughter of kids replaced by whispers of parents. Porch lights stayed off. People didn't linger outside anymore. I tried to tell myself it was over, that it was gone. But last October I was driving home from work late. Fog thick on the road, headlights cutting through the mist. When I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. There it was again, standing at the end of my driveway. Same flannel, same burlap mask, same tilt of the head. I didn't stop. I drove straight past, my eyes locked forward. When I looked in the rearview mirror, it was gone. I don't know who or what it is. Maybe it's someone who likes to scare people. Maybe it's something else entirely. All I know is this. Every year when the air turns cold and the jack-o'-lanterns start appearing, I see straw in the yard. Fresh straw, like something's been walking through, watching, waiting for Halloween night. I never thought Halloween could feel that cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from the wind or the late October air, but the kind that comes from the stomach when something familiar suddenly feels wrong. I'd lived in Evansville, Indiana, my whole life. It's not a bad town, just one of those middle-sized Midwestern places that pretends it's bigger than it is. You can drive 15 minutes and go from downtown brick buildings and flashing bar lights to empty cornfields and the sound of nothing but cicadas. I'd always liked that balance. That Halloween night, though, I started wishing I'd moved somewhere else. Halloween had always been my favorite day of the year. Not because I was into costumes or haunted houses, but because it was the one day the neighborhood came alive. Kids I hadn't seen in months would suddenly fill the sidewalks with laughter. Parents in hoodies clutching thermoses of coffee. It felt human. My name's Aaron Blake and I just turned 30. I was working nights at a warehouse near the Ohio River. 12-hour shifts, hauling freight, drinking too much coffee, and listening to the same rock stations on repeat. My girlfriend Tessa and I had just broken up 2 months before Halloween. She left for Cincinnati after saying she couldn't live somewhere that smelled like diesel fuel and lost dreams. She had a way with words. So that year, I was spending Halloween alone for the first time since high school. I rented a small single-story house on Maple Avenue, a quiet street lined with maples and cracked sidewalks. Most of my neighbors were older folks, retired or young couples with kids. I didn't decorate much, just put out a few pumpkins and one of those fake spider webs from Dollar General. Still, I planned to hand out candy. It gave me something to do, something normal. I even bought full-size candy bars like the good houses do. The plan was simple. Put on some music, crack open a beer, hand out candy until 10 apple, and then crash. But like most plans, that one didn't survive contact with the night. The first wave of kids came right at dusk. Princesses, superheroes, a couple of tiny ghosts dragging pillowcases behind them. I remember laughing when one of the kids, a chubby little pirate, pointed at my porch and said, "You don't got no scary stuff. Guess I'm the boring house this year," I said, dropping a Snickers into his bag. By 8, wow, the stream had slowed. The air had that damp chill that seeps into your clothes. I turned on the porch light, our neighborhood signal that you were still open for business, and went back inside to check my phone. Around 8:40, there was a knock. Not a kid's playful knock, but 3 slow, deliberate thuds. "All right, last call," I muttered, grabbing the candy bowl. When I opened the door, I froze. There were 3 figures standing on my porch. At first, I thought they were teenagers, tall, wearing masks, but something about them felt staged. The masks were plain white, not the store-bought kind. They looked handmade, paper mache maybe, with eye holes cut unevenly. Their clothes didn't match any costume I'd ever seen. Dark jackets, old-fashioned shoes. One of them held a plastic pumpkin bucket, orange and faded. "Trick or treat," they said in unison. Their voices were hollow, too flat, like they'd practiced the line and didn't understand what it meant. Nice costumes," I said, forcing a laugh. "You guys from around here?" They didn't answer, just stood there watching me through those uneven eye holes. I dropped a few candy bars into the pumpkin bucket. "There you go. Happy Halloween." They didn't move. "All right," I said, half joking. "Party's over. Go scare somebody else." The middle one tilted their head slowly, bird-like, and said, "You left your light on." I blinked. "Yeah, that's how kids know they can come up. That's kind of how this works." Then all three of them said together, same tone, same cadence, "Turn it off." I laughed nervously, stepping back inside. "Okay, weirdos. Good night." When I shut the door, I caught a glimpse of something strange through the window. The three figures still standing perfectly still on my porch, facing the door. I waited for them to leave, but they didn't. After a full minute, I turned off the porch light just to make them go. When I checked again, they were gone. I tried to shake it off. Teenagers, I told myself. Dumb prank. But when I went to take out the trash around 10 SARS, there was something new sitting on my porch. A small hand-carved wooden mask painted white, just like the ones they'd worn. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the old house made me flinch. Around 1 a.m., I finally gave up and went to the kitchen for water. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. There was no voice, just faint static, like wind blowing through a tunnel. Then a whisper. "Why'd you turn off the light?" I hung up immediately. My chest felt tight. I locked the doors again, even though they were already locked. In the morning, I told myself it was probably a wrong number, or some kid who'd seen my address on social media. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I stepped outside for work, the wooden mask was gone. That night, I told a coworker, Luis, about it during our break. He laughed. "Man, Evansville kids are messed up. Probably just bored." "Yeah," I said. "But why leave the mask? Art project? Who knows? Don't overthink it." But Louise wasn't there the following night. When things escalated, it was Halloween. Even rain had started early. I'd come home exhausted from the warehouse and didn't even bother eating. I just wanted sleep. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard a knock again. 3 slow thuds just like before. I didn't move. I just lay there staring at the ceiling. The knocks came, again, then again louder. I finally got up, heart hammering. "All right, that's enough," I shouted, storming to the door. When I swung it open, no one was there, just rain pooling on the steps. Then I noticed something on the doormat, a folded piece of paper soaked through. I unfolded it carefully, scrolled. In what looked like black marker were 5 words. Turned, the light back on. I tossed the note in the trash and stayed up until sunrise. By Halloween night, I'd convinced myself the whole thing was a prank. Maybe a group of local kids targeting random houses. Whatever it was, I wasn't playing along. I didn't decorate. I didn't put out candy. I didn't even turn on the porch light. Instead, I sat in the living room, curtains closed, watching old horror movies with the volume low. Every few minutes, I thought I heard footsteps outside, but when I looked, there was nothing. Around 9 p.m., I heard children laughing in the distance, normal trick-or-treat sounds. But then the laughter faded, replaced by something else, a scraping noise like metal dragging across concrete. I muted the TV. The sound was coming from the driveway. I peeked through the blinds. 3 figures were standing there again, motionless under the streetlight. The same white masks soaked from the drizzle. One of them held something long, looked like a garden rake. Another one was dragging a metal pail. They were facing my house. My throat went dry. I reached for my phone to call 911, but when I looked again, they were gone. I stood there shaking for a full minute before I dared to move. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I let it ring, but then a voicemail came through. I played it, hand trembling, static again, then the same whisper. You left your light off. The next morning, I told Luis everything. He stopped, laughing halfway through my story. Dude, you serious? Dead serious, I said. I'm thinking of staying somewhere else tonight. Luis nodded. Stay at my place, man. I got a couch. That evening, I packed a small bag and drove to his apartment near Riverside Drive. When I pulled up, his car wasn't there, but I figured he'd gone out for groceries or something. I let myself in. He'd texted me the spare key code earlier. The apartment smelled faintly of bleach. I set my bag down and noticed his TV was on playing static. I called out, Louise. No answer. I walked toward the hallway. The bathroom door was open, light flickering. Inside, the mirror was shattered, and on the wall, written in something dark, maybe marker, maybe not, were the words. He left his light on. I stumbled backward and nearly fell. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I just ran. When I got to my car, I saw something taped to the windshield. A white mask. I drove aimlessly that night, not even sure where I was going. The streets were slick with rain, Halloween decorations sagging from the weight of BG Bywater. I passed clusters of kids still trick-or-treating, oblivious. Eventually, I ended up near the outskirts of town, close to an old subdivision called Riverbend Estates, mostly abandoned homes. That's when I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I thought it was just another car, but every turn I made, it followed. No matter how fast or slow I went, it stayed the same distance. I turned onto a dead-end street. The car stopped behind, me idling. Then the lights turned off. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, every nerve screaming to move. When I finally threw the car in reverse, the other vehicle's engine revved but didn't follow. It just sat there. I sped home, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. By the time I reached my house, it was past midnight. The power had gone out from the storm. The only light came from the occasional flash of lightning. The note on the porch was gone. The pumpkins I'd left days ago were smashed. I locked every door, every window, and sat in the dark with a baseball bat. I don't know how long I waited before I heard it. The faint creak of the porch steps. Then came the whisper through the mail slot. Turn it on. I didn't move. The voice grew louder, more insistent. Turn it on. Then pounding. Fists slamming against it. I never liked Halloween as much as everyone else in town. Don't get me wrong, I grew up loving the candy runs, the costumes, the porch lights, glowing orange, all that small-town magic. But as I got older, something about the night just stopped feeling right. Maybe it was the way the quiet streets looked too empty after dark, or maybe it was because of what happened that one October when I was 12. Our town, Maple Hollow, sat tucked between pine ridges and a patch of old farmland that everyone swore was haunted. We were one of those places where people still waved at each other from their driveways, where the corner diner closed at 8 and the leaves burned red and gold in the fall like the whole town was on fire. That Halloween started normal enough. I'd just come home from school tossing my backpack on the couch when Mom yelled from the kitchen, "Eli, don't forget to take your sister out tonight. I'm working the late shift and your dad won't be home till morning." "Yeah, I know," I said, trying to sound less annoyed than I felt. "You've told me like 3 times. She appeared from behind the fridge door wearing her nurse scrubs and that look that said, "Don't push me tonight. Just keep an eye on her." "All right, no wandering off near the farms." I nodded even though I already knew we wouldn't. Nobody went near that stretch anymore, Hen. Not since that old barn burned down 2 years earlier. My sister, Lily, burst from her room in a flash of glitter and tulle. "I'm a fairy," she announced proudly, wings bouncing behind her. "Yeah, I can see that," I said. "Pretty sure they heard you in New Hampshire, too." She frowned. "You're no fun, Eli. Didn't say I was." She rolled her eyes. She just turned 9 and thought I was officially too old to understand joy. I pulled on my black hoodie, stuffed some fake fangs in my pocket, and figured that was costume enough. By the time the sun began to dip behind the ridge, the air had that chill that made your nose sting. The streetlights buzzed to life one by one as we joined the rest of the neighborhood. Kids ran in packs, their plastic candy buckets clattering. Porch lights glowed warm. Candles flickered inside jack-o'-lanterns. "Don't forget to say thank you," I reminded Lily for the 10th time. Yeah, she said, running up the next driveway. I stood back on the sidewalk, hands stuffed in my hoodie pocket, watching her skip from porch to porch. Everything smelled like caramel and cold leaves. Parents chatted at the ends of driveways. Somewhere, a speaker played Monster Mash. It all felt good, normal, until I noticed the house at the very end of the street. It wasn't abandoned. Not exactly, but no one had lived there for years. The yard was overgrown, the porch sagged in the middle, and the mailbox leaned sideways, like it had given up trying to stand straight. But tonight the porch light was on, a dim yellow bulb swinging slightly in the breeze. "Hey, Lily," I called. "Skip that one." She turned, confused. "Why?" "Just it's old." Probably not handing out candy, but she looked anyway, squinting down the road. "There's a bowl out front." Before I could stop her, she was already halfway there. "Lily, come on." I jogged after her, my sneakers crunching over dry leaves. The air grew colder as we neared the house. I could smell damp wood and something faintly metallic, like rust. Sure enough, there was a bowl sitting on the steps. Plastic cracked on one side, filled with candy bars. A sign was taped to it, written in messy red marker. "Take one." But what caught my attention wasn't the bowl. It was the thing standing in the yard. A scarecrow, tall, maybe 6 FT, wearing a flannel shirt and a wide-brimmed straw hat. The face was just a burlap sack stitched in a crude smile. It leaned slightly to one side like it had been there too long. "Cool," Lily said. "But look at that." "Yeah, cool," I muttered. I'd seen plenty of scarecrows before, but something about this one felt wrong. The posture looked too natural, like it wasn't stuffed tight enough, like it could just shift if it wanted to. Lily grabbed a candy bar and giggled. "See, nothing scary. Let's go," I said, tugging her sleeve. She frowned. "You're being weird." "Yeah, I get that a lot." We started walking back toward the main stretch, and I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder. The scarecrow looked the same, still leaning, still smiling, but I swear its head was tilted a little differently now. By the time we hit the next street, I'd shaken it off. We met up with our neighbors, the Harpers, whose twin boys were dressed as matching zombies. Their dad, Mr. Harper, was walking with them, beer can tucked into his jacket pocket. "Evening, Eli," he called. "You on duty tonight?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a grin. "Babysitter duty," he chuckled. "Well, at least she ain't making." "You wear wings." Lily stuck out her tongue at him. "He's too scared, too." Everyone laughed. It helped for a bit. The night felt normal again. Voices echoing, the smell of bonfires from backyards, the soft rustle of trees overhead. But around 8:30, the crowd started thinning. Parents led their kids home. Porch lights began to click off one by one. The last stretch of houses sat near the old woods, the ones everyone avoided once it got dark. Lily tugged my sleeve. "One more block." I sighed. "You said that 2 blocks ago. Please, just one." Her eyes had that pleading shine that reminded me too much of Mom's when she wanted something. I nodded. "Fine. 1. We turned down Birch Street, where only 2 houses still had their lights on. The others were dark, their decorations swaying in the wind. We hit the first porch and I watched Lily grab a mini Snickers before thanking the old lady inside. The second house sat on a corner lot, a newer family that had moved in from New Jersey. They had one of those 12T skeletons from Home Depot in the yard. "Whoa," Lily whispered. "That's awesome." She ran ahead again while I lingered at the curb, and that's when I saw it. Across the street, half hidden between 2 maples, stood the same scarecrow, same flannel, same straw hat. But this time, it wasn't leaning anymore. It stood straight, both arms hanging at its sides. My stomach dropped. There was no way. The old house was 3 streets over. "Eli," Lily called. You coming? Yeah. Yeah, I said, forcing my voice steady. Just catching up, I looked again, but the yard was empty now. Only the skeleton glowing faint under the porch light. Maybe I was just tired, maybe someone else put up a similar decoration. But deep down I knew I hadn't imagined it. We finished that block fast. By 9:30 the streets were nearly empty. The wind had picked up sharp and restless whistling through gutters. Can we cut through the park? Lily asked. It's faster. No, I said immediately. We'll stay on the road, come on. It's just a shortcut, Lily, I said no. She folded her arms. You're such a buzzkill. Yeah, and alive. We bickered the whole way back until we reached our driveway. The porch light glowed faintly, flickering from a bad bulb. The pumpkins Mom carved earlier that week sat melted and soggy. Lily darted up the steps. Race you inside. Go ahead, I said, scanning the yard. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual distant barking of dogs had gone silent. Then from across the road I saw it again. Standing at the edge of the woods, the scarecrow. Only. Now the straw hat was gone and the head tilted upward toward me. I blinked and for a moment I thought it swayed, just barely. Eli Lilly called from the door. You coming or what? I turned, forcing a smile. Yeah, right behind you. When I looked back again, it was gone. That night, after Lily fell asleep, surrounded by her candy stash, I stayed up watching TV. Some slasher movie I'd seen a dozen times, but I wasn't really watching. I was listening. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Every creak made my shoulders tense. I got up once to check the front door, then again 10 minutes later, just to make sure I'd really locked it. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I woke, the room was dark and the TV had gone to static. It was 1:13 a.m. Something scraped against the siding outside, slow, dragging. I sat up, heart hammering. The sound came again, straw or fabric brushing wood. I crept toward the window and pulled the curtain just an inch. There was nothing, just the faint shimmer of moonlight over our yard. I exhaled shakily and turned, and that's when I saw movement. A shadow passed by the front porch light. I froze. Another sound, this time from the side of the house, like footsteps crunching gravel. I grabbed Dad's flashlight from the shelf and clicked it on. The beam shook in my trembling hand as I aimed it through the front window. And there it was, standing in our driveway, the scarecrow. No hat, no leaning, just standing there and hands at its sides, the stitched smile stretching too wide under the beam. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. The flashlight flickered once, then died. I ran upstairs, shaking Lily, awake. Hey, wake up now. She mumbled. What? What's wrong? Just get up, okay? Her eyes widened when she saw my face. Eli, what's happening? Someone's outside, I whispered. She froze. What do you mean, someone? I don't know, but just stay close. We huddled at the top of the stairs, listening. The house creaked again, then knocked soft once on the door. Lily whimpered. Don't answer it. I'm not. Another knock, louder this time. Then nothing. The silence was worse than the noise. I waited what felt like forever before creeping back down, flashlight trembling in my grip. Through the window I saw nothing but our porch, no scarecrow, no movement. But when I opened the door, slowly, barely an inch, a piece of straw fell to the floor, and nailed into the porch post right at eye level was one of Lily's candy wrappers pinned there with a rusty nail. The police came that night after I called, them shaking. They searched the yard, the street, even the woods,